Right, it has gone 6:30, so we will make a start on this evening's agenda. Welcome to the Local Plan Advisory Panel on the 9th of December. The meeting will be recorded live, streamed by HTC. Please use the microphones in order for this to work. Only two microphones can obviously work at the same time. Please make sure your mobile phones are switched off or on silent. Fire exits are usually, as usual, to the right. I've not received any apologies. Well, we have actually, haven't we? Because Councillor Elliott is here for Councillor Gare. So we have Councillor Gare. Right, item 3, draft minutes of the Local Plan Advisory Committee on the 13th of November. We need to agree these are a true and accurate record. If you want to raise matters that were dealt with in the exempt, I would suggest that we deal with that under item 6. So at this stage, we're just dealing with matters from those minutes that were in the public session. Yes, Councillor Nicholas.
Just to note that I made my presentation on email. It's already been noted.
Yeah, we received that, so we'll make it.
Is that in relation to items on the last agenda then? Yep, okay. Right, so we'll, Councillor King.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So it's a couple of comments I've got to make. First of all, I just think under where it's got actions, if it could be included the date of when that was actioned, that would be helpful. I mean, that would just be something that would improve the minutes. I also have to say, I think these minutes are better than the previous minutes of all the previous meetings. So if we can keep it at this level, this would be good, because the previous minutes have got nothing in them of any substance, really. Very base minimum. So I don't know, that just historically can't change those, but this is much better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Any other issues on the minutes? Right, someone would like to propose those? Councillor Burrell, thank you. I'll second them. That's carried. Right, item 4 then is latest updates on government planning reforms, and this is going to be presented by Head of Service, Tess Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm just going to give a fairly high-level summary of some of the key changes that are currently progressing. As we know, the government is making fundamental reform of the planning system, and we're currently in a sort of transitionary period between one planning system under the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act and the next planning system under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. Along the way, there's a couple of changes just to bring to your attention. These have some implications for our current local plan, although limited, and I'll just attempt to go through that as I explain them. So taking these in turn, we've got essentially two different legislative changes: the Planning and Infrastructure Bill and the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act and its implementation. So turning first to the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. And so, as we know, this is currently passing through Parliament. It's been through the Houses of Commons and Lords, and it's currently at the stage of considering the amendments that has resulted from those two considerations. So we're expecting royal assent shortly. I'm only going to focus here on the policy aspects. As we know, that bill does introduce a number of changes in relation to development management, but I'm just focusing here on the policy aspects. So the key issue is the introduction of spatial development strategies. There will be much more guidance, much more details on this, and it doesn't directly affect this local plan, but worth just bringing to your attention because it is very much in the planning press and wider press. So we know that spatial development strategies essentially will reintroduce strategic planning, and that refers to planning which is across boundaries, so at a level which is larger than a single local planning authority. So the exact geography and implementation timelines of these are still to be announced by the government, But what we anticipate is that they essentially will be a sort of halfway house, if you like, between regional plans, which covered an entire region, in our case, East Midlands region, and structure plans, which were across the county geography. So, as I say, much more detail on this to follow, but it's really just to put it on your radar at this stage. Turning to Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. So, as we know, this received royal assent in 2023, and this is the act that creates the largest changes in terms of planning policy, and particularly the preparation of local plans. So, as we know, the local plan element of the LURA has not yet been enacted. Beg your pardon, has not yet been brought into force by regulations. What the government has announced 10 days ago is the kind of direction of travel of those regulations. So for authorities, not ourselves, but for authorities who are looking to bring forward a local plan fairly quickly under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, the series of announcements from the government is really helpful because it gives them a direction to travel of how local plans will be prepared under the new system. However, there is an important element for us, which is in relation to the duty to cooperate, and this does impact on the local plan we're currently preparing. So, as we know, duty to cooperate was introduced by the Localism Act in 2011, and essentially to replace regional planning. What we heard 10 days ago from the Minister was that in enacting regulations to bring forward the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, what the government has done is to consider the elements of the current planning system that they wish to take forward and those that they don't. There was an option to save the duty to cooperate such that it continued to apply through all of 2026. However, the government has not chosen to continue to apply duty to cooperate. Instead, the duty to cooperate will cease once the regulations to introduce LURA style plan making are introduced in sort of early 2026. So this means that as we're now being called legacy style plans, we're now producing a legacy style plan. This means that the duty to cooperate will not apply to plans such as ourselves, which are coming forward under the previous Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. There's a really useful letter which I've linked, and we can obviously circulate these slides from the Minister to PINS, the Planning Inspectorate, which sets out how that duty to cooperate ceasing to apply from early 2026, how that will be dealt with by planning inspectors in the examination of local plans. And what that letter does is to explain that the new levels of strategic planning being introduced by the spatial development strategies will instead ensure the effective cooperation, meaning the duty to cooperate as such is no longer required. So effectively, this means that local plans can no longer fail the duty to cooperate. So massively helpful in our case and in the case of any local plan going through in 2026 under the previous system. However, just a note of caution before we get too excited. The tests of soundness are unchanged. And as we know, our local plan will be tested against the test of soundness set out in the NPPF. A couple of those tests of soundness are particularly relevant here. The first of those is in relation to the plan being positively prepared. And this means, I've quoted the wording here, but it saves you reading the whole thing. Essentially, what this means is that unmet need from neighbouring authorities must be considered and planned for in the preparation of a local plan. It must be accommodated where it is practical to do so and consistent with achieving sustainable development. So one of the key planks of the duty to cooperate was to ensure that that unmet need was met. So whilst the duty to cooperate has gone, the requirement in the test of soundness still remains. The other relevant test relates to the local plans being required to be effective, and this means plans must be deliverable They must be based on effective joint working on cross-boundary strategic matters that have been dealt with rather than deferred. And here there is reference to the Statement of Common Grounds. So as we know, we're producing a series of Statement of Common Grounds to support submission of our local plan. And what that means is, whilst we no longer need to meet the duty, we will still need to continue with those Statements of Common Grounds in order to demonstrate that effective joint working across neighbouring authorities and other organisations. So just to summarise all of that, the legal duty to cooperate has gone and won't apply to our local plan. But unmet needs still needs to be accommodated and effective joint working still needs to be demonstrated. And we still need to produce statements of common ground. So the practical implications of the duty to cooperate ceasing to apply are fairly limited.
I was going to say, out of interest, how many statements of common grounds on different things do we have to sign?
So we've got in preparation approximately 12 to 15. So it's quite a sizable amount of work. Yeah. So moving on to the final couple of planks under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, National Development Management Policies. These were announced by government a couple of years ago. They've been reiterated that the current government will continue to produce national DM policies. What we've heard fairly recently in the last couple of weeks is that these are expected in draft form before Christmas and that they will be non-statutory. So at one point they were identified as being statutory, which means that effectively they would trump local plan policies and they would carry greater weight. What we now understand is that's not indeed the case. They will be policy in the national policy in the sense of the NPPF. It will carry that weight. So as such, there'll be limited implications for our local plan. It won't be a case that some of our local plan development management policies will effectively no longer be required because of the national ones. But because they're non-statutory, essentially we're back to preparing our full local plan, including development management policies. So their exact status, role, function will be clarified once they're published, and there'll no doubt be huge sections in the consultation to talk our way through that and explain the government's intentions, exactly how they're expected to be implemented. But what we do know is they will not be replacing our development management policies within our evolving local plan.
Consultation draft expected before Christmas 26.
Before Christmas 25.
Before Christmas 25, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, or Christmas Eve.
Yeah. So I think we've heard that NPPF and National Development Management policies are expected before Parliament rises on the 18th. So yeah, they'll be with us next week. So finally, the NPPF, another one of our Christmas presents. We're expecting a draft before the 18th. We hear the consultation is expected to be fairly lengthy on this, extend well into 2026, which I think is helpful. Clearly for our local plan, it's being produced under the 2023 NPPF, so the changes here won't directly affect this local plan, but nonetheless it's useful to be aware clearly of the direction of travel in terms of national planning policy. The inspector at our local plan examination will no doubt ask, what's the difference? How does your plan relate to the current NPPF? What are the areas where there is a difference and what does that mean? Although we're not being examined under it, the inspector will want to have a clear understanding of that, and we will obviously produce that piece of work. Finally, I've just added a link here. This is the evolving guidance for authorities who are producing a plan under the new system, under the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act. That guidance is evolving. They've described it as draft guidance, a sort of direction of travel. So authorities who are chomping at the bit to get going on producing their plans, they can look at this and get an idea of the direction of travel, but the guidance will be amended when the regulations are published early in 26. Okay, happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, so quick canter through changes at the national level. Questions, Rosita?
Yes, I'm sure I've got plenty more, but first of all, I need to get my head around this. So if in order to start a new local plan, right, so I assume that is not a request, but it is a must to start a new local plan. Because you said, you know, we need to start looking forward to starting a new local plan. Yes,
Well, in addition to the statement, there was also a letter
yeah,
from Matthew
Yeah.
Pennycook, and
Fantastic.
my reading of that is you need to do this. If you're
Yeah.
not doing it, you need
Yeah.
to get on with it. It's then
that is what
there'll
I'm
be-
trying to get
if
my head around.
If you don't do it, there'll be intervention.
Yeah.
It's as strong as that.
So it is not a request, but it's more so a must.
Well, yeah, but it's aimed at those authorities that haven't got on with their plan, or their plan is very old and they've not progressed getting a new plan. I don't think it's particularly directed at us because
So we
we've
don't
pulled out
have
the
to-
stops.
Just carry on with ours regardless. We do not have to start a new one.
No,
No, so we continue with this local plan because of this period of transition between the two planning systems. It generally happens this way, that one planning system will be phasing in while the other's phasing up, because obviously everyone's at different stages. So in this case, it's 2026, which is the kind of transitional year
Yeah.
between what they're now calling legacy plans, which is our plan under the Town and Country Planning Act, and then the new style LURA plans. So I can remember, for example, in 2004, when LDFs came in, we were in that position. We were waiting for guidance so that we could get going on it. So there will be plenty of authorities in that situation, but this doesn't apply to us immediately.
Okay, so then as we are running, there will be no overlap at any point. Because if we are 2026, so by the time ours is finished, because what I'm thinking is if we are talking potentially unitary, and it said, you know, so are we then, it says that we are likely to have to carry on doing local plans. Yes. So then what is our plan B, and how are we going to start looking at ring fencing the amount of money it costs? So just give me an idea. I'm not holding you to it, but it's just jumbled up in my head and I need to get it clear in my mind.
I think it's a really good question, and there isn't a straightforward answer, I'm afraid. So the guidance talks about authorities at different stages of plan making and what that means in terms of them starting producing a plan under the new system. Because the guidance is in draft format, it doesn't cover every eventuality, and it's not entirely clear at this stage. So further clarity will emerge, and then we can obviously bring that back to you. In terms of the funding of it, conversations, as I understand it, are happening internally about what that means in terms of funding any future local plan as and when we're required to do that. We know that local plans need revising, reviewing every 5 years. So we know there is that sort of ongoing commitment anyway. So the exact timing of any further plan and how that fits in with LGR, I'm afraid, is too complex.
But I just kind of thought it would be good to start ring fencing, you know, finances and whatever. And I'm no doubt everybody else. One more question is the timeline of the consultation. Do we know, because he said well into the next year, so, you know, have we got any timelines?
All I've heard is a suggestion that it's going to be a fairly lengthy consultation. Government consultations are generally 12 or 16 weeks.
That's in
so
line with
I
the
think-
running principles, isn't it? You've got to, yeah.
Yeah, so I expect it to be
Okay.
that sort of length.
It's just a quick one, councillor Galton. Yeah, we've been thinking about budget as you, it's on. We are thinking about budget in case we need to start a new local plan quite quickly. Again, beyond this new one we're doing now, we are considering the budget. I'm seeking guidance as well from colleagues in the industry as to what the interpretation of the minister's letter is. It is possible, but we're a bit early yet to be able to be absolutely crystal clear on the extent to which we'll need to start another new local plan quite early. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor King.
Okay, let's just start with what David's just said. What do you mean by starting a new local plan very quickly? Given that the trajectory that was discussed at the last meeting is that the local plan's not likely to be on the books, assuming it all goes to your perfect timetable that you've come up with, but it's unlikely to be on the books before the end of next year, right? So does that mean that there's a possibility that we will have to start a new local plan before the end of next year?
Yes.
Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Have you seen the minister's letter?
I've seen the minister's letter and I raised a query with David in an email. He said he would cover it off in the meeting.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if you're covering that off now or you're covering
We're still,
a stage one review or whatever that is.
some of these things are not 100% clear, but there's definitely a direction of travel that if you've gone under the old system, you will need to at least start
So,
a new plan by a date next year.
so actually the bit I've read says you have to do stage one gateway review by the end of October 26. The
Correct.
question then is,
Well,
what is the stage one?
what we're getting further advice on is exactly what these gateways mean, because they're
What-
kind of new, then, but David will
Yeah,
amplify, but, we will need more clarity before we can say categorically what we've got to do. But the critical issue is we may not, we may just need to sort of start it.
I mean, the only reason I raise this reminds me of the changeover from core strategy to MPPF when we got caught out then because the government of the day brought in, the coalition government brought in a new system and the core strategy we hadn't finished doing various documents for it. So we ended up
We're
getting.
still, David,
So
remember,
I'm
we're
just
still,
wondering whether that's gonna
we're
be-
still okay if we get this plan submitted by a certain date. David will remind us.
The date
of-
previously was the 10th of December next year.
Right, we're still okay to proceed with this plan and for this plan to become a statutory document. The issue is when we have to start the review of the next
We've
one.
got to do a review by the end of October next year, i.e. potentially,
Well,
that's what it said.
Start.
Stage
Start.
one review, whatever that is, because we don't know what stage one review is.
I'll bring David in.
It's got some more, I can amplify that.
So it won't be the same. I think I'm fairly confident in saying, councillor King, it won't be the same as when the new system came in last time. We won't lose everything like we lost the core strategy last time. We have baked in the transitional arrangements. What the government seems to be indicating in their latest letter is that, and I'm looking into this is what I was saying a minute ago, I'm looking into it in more detail as to the exact direction of travel. So I can't be certain on it yet. It's so fluid at the moment. But what the inspector appears to be saying is that potentially we might have to get to gateway one in the new local plan process by the end of October. And gateway one is an initial mandatory checkpoint for local authorities preparing a new local plan under the upcoming system. And its purpose is to ensure the local planning authority is ready to adopt a local plan within a 30-month time frame. So essentially it's a statement or a notice, a notification to the community that we as an authority think we're ready to start a 30-month clock to prepare a new local plan under the new system. And to get there, we have to have consulted the stakeholder community that work with us on our preparation of a local plan for 4 months. So I'm working it through. It might be we have to start that piece of work relatively early in 26, 27 to create a circumstance that we pass Gateway 1, which is a sort of a health check or the first of a continuous assessment under the new system.
Yeah, so how can you do that if it's a possibility that we may not have got the current local plan that we're working on actually on the books? So how can you do that if we haven't got the current draft local plan on the books?
Well, we'd have to do two pieces of work in parallel.
Well,
We'd carry on with the
So
existing
therefore,
local
which
plan.
one would then be deemed by the planning inspectorate to have validity?
The current local plan we're doing, because we'd all only be going to Gateway 1, so it wouldn't be going to the level of examination on the new local plan. There'd be a degree of parallel work on here. We'd be finishing the new local plan we're doing now. So post submission, carrying on through examination, adoption, and all of those processes that we're familiar with to the end of that. That would then become adopted if the council choose to. In parallel, we'd be
Right.
starting the next
So
one.
just working this through then, based on what you've just said, that means the existing local plan will have a considerably a lifespan that's considerably less than 5 years.
Potentially, it might not be. It could be that we
Very little time
Well,
based on what you've just said.
it'll certainly be
When
3
are
or
we
4
going to
years.
get?
I would
So hang
estimate.
on. Yeah, hang on. So when are we going to get clarity from the government about what this means?
Well, the government are laying regulations, they're laying guidance in the new year, so we are beholden to them to.
Well, this puts a massive
advise.
spanner in the work. Don't mind me saying,
Which-
Chair, this puts a massive spanner in the works. Because if we're going to carry on doing the draft local plan now, and before we've even got it on the books, we're going to have to start a review of the new local, of a replacement local plan before we've even got it on the decks. So that's a realistic prospect. And
It's
to
a
me,
potential.
that's complete confusion. I mean, probably not the government's intention, but what that means is we're in very real danger of getting appeal after appeal after appeal, because the development industry will say,
I think,
your plan here that's not the right one. You should be doing the other one.
no, I don't think that's, Rob's got some information
Chess has got.
he can share with us and then I'll bring Tess in.
Probably a similar point to Tess, I suspect. I think we just need to be really careful about getting carried away with what's been published, because ultimately it will be the regulations that are published in the new year and the explanatory text associated with that will set out more clearly what the implications of this are. What the government have done is they've published, this is just my personal view, some half-baked guidance that when I read it, doesn't make a lot of sense, and the word confusion's already come up. I find it hard to believe that the intention of government would be to allow plans to progress under the existing system, whilst at the same time having to prepare a plan under the new system and ride both horses at the same time. I find it hard to believe that's the intention. But as drafted, this is only draft guidance as well. It could be read one way and it could be read the other. The reality is we're not going to get a clear answer until the new year, when the regulations are published and guidance is ultimately updated. So we just need to be really careful about treating this as fact at this point.
No, that's a good point, Rob, and thank you for that. I've got a further point which I'd like to raise though, or just clarify. So what you've said, Tess, thank you very much for your presentation. And we're grateful the slides are going to be sent round afterwards. But so what I understand you've said, if the government's abolished duty to cooperate as a legal test in local plan, but in effect, what was underpinning duty to cooperate hasn't gone away. It's still there. In sense, you've still got to meet unmet need or consider unmet need from neighbouring areas, and you've still got to look at how you can solve the cross-border strategic matters through statements of common ground. The thing that was slightly, I just wanted to clarify then, is on the national DM policies. Obviously, we haven't seen the draft yet because that's still 2 weeks to Christmas. But is that actually been laid out in a regulation that it won't be statutory, or is that still a draft that they say it won't be statutory and the government could still change its mind and make it statutory? I.e., they could have another flip-flop on the matter. We can put it like that. And then the same with, I mean, the NPPF, obviously that's slightly different, but that's going to go on and on. But the other thing was just on this strategic planning. So if if the statement of common ground duty to operate gets abolished by, so let's say the 1st of April, say for the sake of argument, does that mean that another authority will take over the strategic planning role at the 1st of April? And if so, which authority is it that's taking on the strategic, or combination of authorities is taking on the strategic planning role for Leicestershire or Leicester or whatever it is? I mean, what's the area it's going to operate over for starters?
Thank you.
Do you want me to take
Yes, please.
those? On the previous point, just picking up Rob's point about this guidance being in draft form. The other thing that I was going to say, the related issue, is that there are, as I understand it, 119 plans across the country that are in a similar position to ours. So it would be fairly odd for the government to introduce a system that requires a third of local planning authorities to be working on 2 plans at a time. It's a huge number. In terms of the flip-flopping on the statutory, it's an interesting question. As I understand it, MHCLG has announced that it's going to be non-statutory, so it's not impossible for them to go back the other way, but I think I'd be surprised having announced it. The other question around the statutory planning, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because the ministerial letter very clearly explains that the duty to cooperate is ceasing to apply, and that statutory planning will fill the void, if you like. But you're absolutely right. The timescales do not exactly align. So duty to cooperate will cease to apply from early 2026 when those new regulations come into force. Spatial development strategies won't be in place in 2026. We expect to hear more about sort of geographies, the implementation timeline for it, but they certainly won't be in place within that sort of timeline.
Right, David will now explain. We have done a bit on these strategic plans that are going to be produced by upper tier authorities initially, and then they will transfer to the mayor or whoever is appointed or elected for us. But do you want to explain that process?
Well, Chairman, if you just indulge me on one point before then, though, because what I was going to say, just wrapping up the conversation we had a little while ago about local plans, it's fascinating for me and planners to have this scenario, and we are looking into the detail of what the government's trying to achieve here. But I would bring members back to the overriding objective we're trying to achieve with what work we're doing now, which is to restore a 5-year land supply to the district. And we need, I would suggest as director, and my other colleagues I'm sure will agree with me, focus our attention on that. Yes, the government will be reintroducing various new elements of new systems. There are 2 acts about to be brought onto us, which is probably unprecedented as well. But I would respectfully advise is to focus on getting a local plan adopted as soon as possible and get that land supply back. In terms of strategic spatial development strategies, the government are intending, as I understand it, to introduce a board for making spatial development strategies, and those boards will relate to the strategic area that the government determine. And indications at the moment for Leicestershire is that strategic area will be Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. So a board, and we don't know what that board's going to look like yet, whether it's going to be local authorities only or whether it'll be other stakeholders, whether they'll try to represent a wider societal group of stakeholders, we don't know. But that's the indication, is that there'll be a statutory board that's established, and it will relate to Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. Thank you, Chairman.
Does that answer your question? So initially, the county council will need to gear up to start preparing these strategies, and we'll work through the board. But then, as I say, when whatever comes in, whether we're going to have our own their elected authority, or whether we're going to be forced to become part of the East Midlands, then it will transfer there.
So what I wanted to say about that is, first of all, irrespective of that, the likelihood is that LGR is going to be 2-3 years down the line. A mayor or mayor may not come about. If we're just a foundation combined authority, there's no requirement for a mayor currently. It's only if you become a strategic level authority over a much bigger landscape, and there's no certainty we would join the East Midlands Combined Authority. So that's not a given either, because they'll be so many years ahead of us. So I think there's a lot of unknowns, as they say. But the thing that's concerning me here, and I think this is what we'll need to understand here and elsewhere, is what's the basically, if it's just a board of the city, the county, and Rutland, then that could be a very small board, and potentially, if it's like the LEP was, the ability of, well, we've still got like LPAs at districts and boroughs, to input into that is going to be quite restricted because it was previously. So I've got some concern. We just need to see how that's going to be shaped out by the government, really, because otherwise it's just going to become we're getting done to again by others who've got another axe to grind.
Yes, because I don't disagree with you, because one of the things it will do will include distribution of housing numbers from LLR down to each local planning authority. So that will be a key function that it will have. And if you think back to the old regional strategies, they did, they took that overall figure and they prioritised it. Traditionally, they prioritised it to the areas where there was more infrastructure, which was the north of the county. And we came off quite well under that. That's, remember our figure used to be 300 a year that we had to deliver. And that's because we had that regional strategy, which directed it elsewhere in the county. Now, I think that's all changed now, and I think you probably need to read the starting point. This is a personal view. The starting point will be that document, Councillor King, that you had an input into. The what was it called? The one that had the road going round.
Strategic growth plan.
That's it. I think my feeling is that the starting point will be to take that and see how it needs to be changed. But that's just a personal view.
Well, that's supposed to have been reviewed, hasn't it, for the last 2.5 years? You're on that board now, aren't you?
It hasn't. That board hasn't met for some considerable time.
That's very disappointing to hear that.
It hasn't had any business to transact because of the uncertainty. But clearly, going forward, all this is kind of up in the air. But that document, it was agreed. They don't like the word review. They didn't want to talk about review, but they did agree that because of the amount of time that had elapsed and the changes that took place, that it needed I think the phrase was a refresh or something like a refresh. And that piece of work is ongoing. I certainly haven't seen any outcomes from that. I just go back to the combined authority. I'm not so. I think the government wants everywhere to have some form of combined authority. They clearly stated that. And I think if we don't come up with something, again, I think we could be shoehorned into somewhere. Because otherwise, there's going to be these areas, I forget the word they used, they had a particular word where there was just nothing other than the local authorities. Orphans, that's right. That's exactly it. So my thinking is that if we don't come up with something ourselves, we will be put somewhere. But that's, again, a personal view. Do you want to come in again, David?
Well, it was just to say, Councillor Scott, I think and this is again is me empathising with what I think might happen. The initial one will be for Leicestershire and Rutland. Beyond that, and as combined authorities, mayoral authorities become more mature and larger, that's when we could, post LGR, be put into some other wider combined area. But we don't know, and no idea which way that will go, whether it will be towards the East Midlands, Derby and Nottingham, or south towards Northampton and Milton Keynes, because as members may remember, the South Midlands sub-regional strategy was probably the closest I can get from history that's akin to a spatial development strategy, because Tessa's already said regional strategy was clearly to regional level, but there were those variants of sub-regional strategies, and the closest ancestor, if that's the right word, to SDSs that I can find are the old sub-regional strategies that particularly took parts of regions and planned for them in a bit more detail. So it could go north or it could go south. We just don't know at the moment. But for starters, it will be Leicestershire and Rutland before LGR. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, any other questions on the changing landscape of strategic planning, local planning? Right, so we've covered the public part of the meeting. I'm now going to item 5. The following items are to be dealt with under section 100A4, Local Government Act 1972. Following resolution needs to be proposed and seconded, voted on. The reports are exempt not for publication by virtue of paragraph 3, part 1 of schedule 12A of the Local Government Act. I'm going to move that. The seconder, Councillor Burrell, thank you. And see all those in favour. Thank you. Turn the recording off.